So what happens if we end up not working in a factory? We've talked about a lot of things this semester, but one real truth that we got to come to terms with is that our position and our duties and our responsibilities are largely going to depend on what system we end up working in. One of the ways you can think about what we do is through a lens of economics. We are, after all, talking about writing within the workplace, and within the workplace, you have to have certain considerations. Well, economics is a really complex situation, and I really can't boil it down to one thing. But if I was forced to boil it down to one thing, I would say that economics largely involves thinking about the interaction between cost and benefit. If you do something, it's going to yield a certain benefit, but at what cost? But if you want a very simple, straightforward, and good enough to get moving way of looking at things through an economics perspective, you could do much worse than the cost-benefit analysis. So let's apply that. And when people think about business, they tend to think about big business, and our mind is still tied in, at least to a certain extent, on factory work. So, how does cost-benefit analysis come to play in factory work? Well, if you're a factory owner, you have to think about these things an awful lot. Do you get in there and get your hands dirty and do the stuff yourself? Or do you hire people to do the basic running of the factory for you? There's a cost-benefit analysis there. It frees up your time, but you have to pay additional person, and you have to pay additional person who you can trust. What about the workers? How well do you treat the workers? Treating them well might get you certain benefits, but it will cost you money to do so. It's not just big business factory workers who have to think about this. Say we're talking about craft production. Let's say that you're a woodworker. Well, you could have complete freedom to do everything yourself, but then you would have to do everything yourself. And some people who are crafts workers find it easier to hire someone to take care of the sales. After all, if your real strength is making nice pieces of furniture, is selling them necessarily going to be your strength? You might also want to hire somebody to do the paperwork, to do the taxes and all other things for you. Is it worthwhile? Are you making enough money to hire someone to take care of all those nitpicky things that you're not the best at? Well, when you're starting off, you couldn't. At what point is it worth spending the money, which is money, after all, that you're not getting paid because you're having to send it somewhere else? If you're a musician or an artist of some other sort, this comes up a lot. Most musicians end up having to be extraordinarily self-sufficient because they're small enterprises. One of the things that people do when they get to a certain size is hire someone who can book shows for them, because booking shows is a completely different skill set than playing shows. And people who are experts at booking shows are going to be a lot more tied into who you have to talk to get gigs. They will be able to work in different ways than a musician does. Let's face it, musicians don't get to be musicians because they're business savvy. And a little known fact about musicians and other artists, well, I know this firsthand from musicians, you don't make a whole lot of money from playing the shows themselves, and a larger revenue stream for musicians is selling merchandise. Well, the problem with selling merchandise, you can get more money coming in, yeah, but you have to invest X amount of money in order to be able to get the merchandise put up to begin with. And then do you hire someone to sell it for you? Do you go there after you play and sell it yourself? And if that's the case, that's taking time away from other things you could be doing. There are many other ways to do this kind of stuff. If you have physical products, you can sell them on an online source. Online sources are going to put certain limitations on what you can sell, and they're going to take a certain chunk of your money. But is it worth losing a chunk of your money for the added exposure that a site like Etsy can do? And then do you pay to get the stuff made up in advance, or do you hire a print-on-demand company? If you hire a print-on-demand company to make things like your t-shirts, if you're a musician, you don't have to invest the money right away. However, each bit of that product gets to be a lot pricier. Print-on-demand costs more money to do, and that might limit your sales. Is it worth it? You have to run the cost-benefit analysis. Now, you're college students, and I know you're thinking about a lot of stuff, but I hope you were asking yourself at least something like these questions when you were watching the video, The Art of Asking. Amanda Palmer is very much a let's do everything yourself kind of person, but that costs you in certain ways. It might benefit you in other ways. I want to change the narrative here just a little bit, because we've been talking about the people who run the enterprises. Are you going to move into straight owning your own enterprise? Being in charge of everything? There's a good chance that you might have to work for someone else first, and that changes the whole cost-benefit analysis that you will have to do, because it's a different thing to look at how a factory works from the perspective of a factory owner than it is the people who actually do the work in the factory. And they have to do these kind of cost-benefit analyses too. Is it worth staying late to impress my bosses and rob this much time from my normal life? Is it worth taking a day off to look for other jobs? There are different considerations from the point of view of workers. And some of them are inherent in the system that you're working in itself. And for a little bit more on that, let's watch a brief explanatory video.
Karl Marx on alienation. Karl Marx believed that work, at its best, is what makes us human. It fulfills our species' essence, as he put it. Work allows us to live, to be creative, to flourish. However, the reality in 19th century Europe was that work destroyed workers, particularly those who had nothing to sell but their labor. To the mill and factory owners, a worker was simply an abstract idea with a stomach that needed to be filled. The workers had no choice but to toil long hours for a pitiful wage. What was worse, their labor alienated them. Alienation is a disorienting sense of exclusion and separation. Factory labor, under capitalism, alienated the workers from the product of their labor. They made stuff they couldn't afford to buy, which disappeared to shops in far-off places, to make money for people who paid them next to nothing. The factory production line split jobs into meaningless tasks that made the hours at work tedious, empty and bleak. They became cogs in a gigantic machine. Workers lived for the few hours at home when they could eat, sleep and relax. The rest of the time, they weren't fully alive. This work also alienated them from each other. The only way out of this drudgery, Marx argued, was for the workers to organize and revolt. They needed to seize the means of production, leading to his famous rallying cry, "Workers of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your chains."
There are lots of reasons to talk about Marx, but let's just leave this one here because we've got other fishes to fry. We're talking about means of production other than the big factory work. Marx was mostly talking about the big factory work. Let's talk about a new method of production, the gig economy. You've heard of this. Have some extra time? Drive for Uber, or deliver food for Uber Eats, or Grubhub, or something. And I think this is something worth thinking about because a lot of jobs have tended to really embrace the gig economy. You know the apps, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub. If you have a room in your house, you can rent it out on one of the housing places. I can't believe I'm having problems remembering the name of that one which acts as unlicensed hotels, but you know what I'm talking about. Now, the gig economy is sizable. Gig workers tend to provide a lot of professional, creative, and administrative services. That's 59% of them. 33% provide skilled manual or personal services. It's not just driving and delivery services like we think. You can hire accountants on gig economy. You can hire musicians on gig economy. And as it says, yeah, the numbers look like they don't add up, but gig workers often work more than one type of gig job and more than one type of gig service. And these are popular and increasingly popular and getting more and more popular as we speak. Lots of people embrace the gig economy. Lots of companies embrace the gig economy. Why do the business owners like it? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one perspective on this is that the gig economy produces revenue for businesses and tech resources that don't want full contractual obligations. That's worth thinking about for a second, because you can hire someone to deliver your food, to do your grunt work, to move packages, to drive you around and do other things, and the company that so-called hires them doesn't have to worry about things like employee benefits, because gig workers don't get paid benefits, don't get health insurance. It's a way for big businesses to hire people and not have to do the standard obligations, the standard costs, which they would have to do for a normal employee. It really changes the cost-benefit analysis. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a writing class. Why are we talking about such things? Well, how you write and the things you write are going to be very dependent on the type of system you get into. And ethics is a part of that. And this is something we've talked about. It's actually a mandate of this class. Are you able to exist as a gig worker, as a full-time worker, as someone who might hire gig workers if you don't think about ethics? And, as Amanda Palmer might ask, is that a fair way to proceed? Something to ponder. For all this to really hit home, you really need to think about what your position in all this is going to be. Are you going to work in a big business? Are you going to be the person who the craftsperson hires? Are you going to be the person who sets up a business booking bands and all that? And writing is going to play a slightly different role in each of these situations. If you're a worker in one of those situations, it's also got to make you rethink your ethics, rethink your business approach, rethink a lot of things. Would you be willing to do as much while working for a big company as you would if you were working for individual artists? Would you be willing to do the same kind of things if you were working for yourself or running a small business as you would if you were working in a larger organization? How do all these things change what you're willing to do and how you go about doing it? Your responsibilities are going to be a lot different in each case. One of the things that the gig economy teaches us, a lot of people say, is that the gig economy allows companies to care a lot less about their employees because they're not really their employees. They're just contractors. And there's a long history of all this stuff. How it's going to affect you as a future professional in these fields? Well, that's going to be up to you. But I have faith in you that you'll do the right thing. See you in the next video, everybody.